Schedule today.
Thank you. And reminder, we're on Zoom, so a lot of people on Zoom. Oh, great. I watched all day on Zoom yesterday. It was awesome. Yeah. The only thing, any questions? Can't hear them. So, from the audience. Repeat them or hold the mic. Because somebody said something that day and I could hear it. And I heard it was really awesome.
All right, Walter, right on time. Eskimo time.
Mics are hot.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the weather infrastructure panel. Before we get started, I don't see him in here, but Will Day and Rebecca are running around. If you see them sometime today, give them a big slap on the back. They're doing an awesome convention. So big thanks to them. Everybody in Zoom land, welcome. It's good to see you guys. I watched a lot from Zoom yesterday, and it's super good. So the technology is awesome. Hello, everybody on Zoom. And we'll get started. So I'll let our panelists introduce themselves. We have Greg Dyer, Walter Combs, and David Kochevar. And once they introduce themselves, David will come up and give a weather service presentation. Then we'll get started. So Walter, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'm Walter Combs. I'm retired from the FAA weather camera program, and I now run founder and CEO of Monteith Corporation, doing pretty much the same kind of work: weather cameras, weather data, non-fed AWAS work, and that kind of stuff. So that's where I'm at now.
Hi, good morning. I'm Dave Kochevar. I am the Alaska Region Aviation Meteorologist. So I am at Alaska Region Headquarters with the National Weather Service here in Anchorage, where we oversee the aviation weather forecasting services for the state. So as Lee mentioned, I'll kind of go over what we provide, but that's what I'm here for. I represent the Weather Service. Thanks.
I'm Greg Dyer, currently under contract with Alaska DOT MPF for Troy over here. Former FAA, 35 years, air traffic control, en route experience, tower experience. My work over the last year here in Alaska has been working on a gap analysis, looking at infrastructure for all things aviation.
Thank you guys for the intros. And weather is an interesting topic, right? Because starting in the 50s, we went from, well, even before that, but when flying really started picking up in Alaska, especially in the West Coast, in the 50s, there wasn't a lot of weather, right? It was just go look. In 60s, same thing, 70s. You get into the 80s, the history of communities in rural Alaska, why they're placed where they are, how schools got started, how runways were built, how weather service and infrastructure started is very interesting. But as we moved into the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there was rapid change, and there's continuing to be rapid change. And so as we run through the discussion today and the questions today, kind of think through some of the questions that you guys might have as an audience. We'll have plenty of time at the end for questions. We have about an hour, so a little less than an hour, 50 minutes, and we'll try to stay on task, on schedule. And so with that, David, you're up. And by the way, I'm Lee with Ryanair.
I think so. Big button, okay, thank you. All right, good morning again. Like I mentioned before, this is just kind of a few slides here talking about what we offer here with National Weather Service Alaska region and kind of what we oversee and what we do at our offices. So this is what we have nationally as far as our forecast offices. So if you are flying elsewhere in the country, we have a network of forecast offices that are doing the TAP services. In addition, that you don't see in the graphic here, we have meteorologists co-located at all the centers, including here in Anchorage, that are working with air traffic controllers and taking your PIREPs and things like that. You can see up here in Alaska, we have offices housed here in Anchorage, Fairbanks, and in Juneau that are doing, from the aviation perspective, they're focusing on the TAF forecasts, airport weather warnings, things like that. This next slide here, you can see kind of what we offer as a wholesale for Alaska itself. So the lion's share of what we do for aviation is done by the Aviation Weather Unit, the AWU, here in Anchorage on Sand Lake Road. They're also kind of have like a co-mission of the Anchorage Volcanic Ash Advisory Center as well. So anytime there's eruption of a Alaskan volcano or even Russian volcanoes that move into our airspace, we're doing any advisories and SIGMETs for that. We also have, like I mentioned, meteorologists that are embedded with the air traffic control centers. So we have what are called center weather service units that are there 16 hours a day to support air traffic, provide briefings, help the supervisors, help the traffic managers, that kind of thing, just trying to keep the NAS as efficient as we can. We also, as I mentioned, have those forecast offices throughout the state focusing on the TAFs, and here in Anchorage doing the airport weather warning. In addition, at those offices are where most of our technicians are. So those are the folks that are servicing and maintaining a lot of the ASOSs in the state. The one thing that we'll probably get to in the panel discussion to remember when it comes to weather that not a lot of people understand is that we actually don't do as much owning and maintaining of weather equipment throughout the state as you might think. So it's really limited to a few of the ASOSs. We unfortunately can't do anything with AWOSs, that's all FAA, and the same thing with the weather radars as well throughout the state. In addition, this is where I come from at Alaska Region Headquarters, where we have kind of our policy wing and our science and improvement team, and our technicians and facilities folks, as well as our regional director in the federal building here in Anchorage. So this is kind of drilling down on what we do at the AWU. You can see a really large airspace stretching from Russia to the Canadian border and even to the pole, where they are doing any SIGMETs that you might see, any AirMets, area forecasts, the graphics that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar from the AWU website. But in addition, you might not know, we do a lot of ad hoc phone briefings. So if there is anything that you are seeing in the forecast, there's a contact information on the bottom of their website that you're welcome to call. And believe it or not, you get to a meteorologist right off the bat. So that's, it's Alaska weather. It can get confusing. It can be complicated. So that can be a nice resource for you. In addition, we're doing more and more briefings for other agencies. We're doing test bed exercises, tabletop exercises, things like that, that we're trying to improve our coordination with other agencies that have an aviation concern. Like I mentioned, we also have at the AWU the Volcanic Ash Advisory Center. This is actually the same staff that's producing your aviation forecast that you're seeing. So just kind of a dual duty that they do. About 50 volcanoes in Alaska that they are monitoring and doing their products for. And I mentioned we're also doing, you can see kind of west of the airspace in the Kurile and Kamchatka Peninsula there. That will often move to the southeast and cross those jet tracks that you see there. So lots of coordination with international agencies, with Russia and with Tokyo with that. And all those products are available online, both in a text and a graphical form. We're Alaska, so we have huge areas of responsibility, and this is our forecast offices up in the state overlaid over what you could see in the CONUS. I don't know if you remembered on the second slide there how many offices are doing what we're doing from our forecast offices here. And staff-wise, we have less than twice the personnel that are doing the duty. So it's a pretty broad area, and it's a pretty big mission that we do. But you know, it's kind of the mission and the how we work up here in Alaska. The other thing to remember too, we have some data collections offices in the Aleutians and the Bering Sea that are doing the weather balloons there. But as far as forecast services, they're all done out of the forecast offices you see there. The red dots you see on the map there are where we have the weather radars, or where the weather radars exist that are a huge part of our operations. Again, you can see the coverage compared to CONUS is pretty limited, especially interior Alaska, northern Alaska, and really nothing as you get west of Bethel. So that's all I have. There's a few links there if you didn't already have it. I'm sure most of you already do, to the AWU, but there's also, if you haven't looked at this GFA link, graphical forecast for aviation in Alaska, that's a really great resource for interactive and graphical forecast services. So thank you.
That was a great highlight and a great opening for the panel today. How many of you guys have seen the show Alaska Weather? Anybody? Just a handful? When I was growing up, I grew up in Unalakleet, and every single day when I got, I'd come home from school, my dad would be out flying all day, and he'd show up, sometime between afternoon and late evening, but he was always home for Alaska Weather. And Reuben B. Eaton would get on there, and this guy's like a staple. If you're from Western Alaska, he was a hero. He died, 20-some years ago? But everybody that's from rural Alaska remembers Reuben Eaton. Last year, the Alaska Weather, Alaska Public Radio or News, I can't remember, APRN maybe, one of those areas cut the show because of funding. And we're here with our cell phones, we're here with connectivity that you cannot believe. We have the ability to not have to watch Alaska Weather as an airline, as a individual, but where I'm from, the people who are going hunting don't have that capability. They don't have the bandwidth. They don't have the ability to watch YouTube, where Alaska Weather still is, nor find it, nor most of them don't know what YouTube is. And so we have a huge gap, not just in infrastructure for aviation, but survivability in rural Alaska. When my dad watched it, he wanted to know what was happening with weather systems coming in. He wanted to be able to have a heads up when he called flight service the next day for a brief before he flew all day to places that didn't have AWOS. He wanted to know what to expect, where icing might be, where he might run into some issues. And that aspect was a big deal for aviators, but the people out west needed that so they could know where the ice was. They could see satellite images of where ice is. They could see, what winter weather or summer weather waves to expect. It's a huge deal, and it's a gap that we currently miss in rural Alaska. So as we think through, we're going to be talking about infrastructure a lot. As we think through aviation infrastructure, it's still a huge gap to the public. The infrastructure to be able to safely go hunting seals, the infrastructure to be able to safely go out with their snow machines, and if they broke down, they'd have an idea of how many days the weather is going to be bad. We still miss that, on top of 30-some communities still not having running water. We're an infrastructure poor state. So as we sit here today and talk through basic weather infrastructure, there's a whole, that much of the state out west that's still having a gap in terms of getting that information. So the information is going to continue to be an issue. So David, the first question is going to be for you. You showed a slide with, the Alaska map over the United States, and you guys have ungodly amounts of airspace you're trying to cover, weather you're trying to receive. My question is, because it's magic to me, I don't know how you guys do the forecasts, especially I think of Russia, right? Because all the jets now don't go through Russia airspace. Do you pick up a phone and call Vladimir and say, hey, what's your weather systems producing today? Your weather radar making things that they have over there. But how do you use information to build a forecast? And what infrastructure do you currently have, and what infrastructure are you lacking compared to the lower 48?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. Briefly to talk about the Alaska Weather Show, yeah, that was a kind of an unfortunate situation that we were in last year with having to stop the broadcast of that. It's not a project that we've ended. We're still working with broadcasters in Alaska to try to find, you know, Broadcasting Alaska is nothing but creative Alaska solutions, and we're trying to find the best one for that. So you're right. Currently, it's on YouTube, but we're working with broadcasters to find a way to get onto ARCS or maybe the radio or some solution that can work for everybody. But it's definitely a hard battle to get airtime to do that. But it's not one we've given up on. With regards to weather infrastructure in Alaska, yeah, it's certainly limited. One of the things that meteorologists are really good at is filling in the blanks and working with data sets that aren't complete, but we're still limited with the lack of true real-time ground truth information to fill in those gaps and to train our forecasters. We're using everything we can get our hands on as far as observations, certified or not. We don't really care. So we're using, as soon as the webcams came out, we were using those really, really heavily. Going back to the late 2000s. Weather radars we're using as much as we can. Satellite is probably the largest use up here in Alaska, both polar orbiting and geostationary. We're using American satellites, we're using Japanese satellites, you name it. So there's a huge amount of international data that we can pull from. And that's probably the one area that we've had the most improvements of in the last, say, 10 or 15 years is with satellite data and the amount of data we can draw from it. One of the huge challenges that we still have, though, with satellite data is like the low level where a lot of you are flying, say, like under 15,000 feet with like really deep cloud cover. It's a hard thing to monitor from a space from above. But it's something that we're getting better at, getting better resolution, getting more information. And we're looking at satellites in different ways than when I started my career 15 years ago, which is really exciting. Yeah, so that's really kind of the evolution that we're working with. We're always looking to expand, radar coverage or observational coverage or things like that as we can, but we're somewhat limited in both what we are funded as an agency to do, and then our budget to do that when we do have the funding to do so. And then, last but not least, we can cover every inch of the state with sensors, but at the end of the day, we have a infrastructure issue with communications in Alaska. So, that's a really common issue that we're battling today is equipment that's working great and functioning normally doesn't need to be maintained, but unfortunately it's not getting to the rest of the world due to some sort of communications problem. So that's a lot of different avenues to answer your question, but it's sort of mentioned, I guess, leads to the complexity of what we do every day.
That's what I appreciate about today's panel is we often don't think of those complexities. We're using the system, we're educating the congressional delegation a lot of times. And we have the state of Alaska here, we have the FAA here, we have air carriers here, and that 15,000 foot area, a lot of the carriers in here, that's our world. That 0 to 15,000 feet, and the closer to zero you get, the worse it gets, right? And so you have to turn around early a lot of times. But as we educate our congressional delegation, that's something that we could do better as carriers. We could say, hey, even though the FAA owns ASOS, even though weather cameras is a huge component, the gap is how do you use that information other than the airline going from point A to point B? Hooper Bay, for example, the AWOS was out for after Typhoon Merbok, it was out for 8 months, 12 months, maybe longer. And so you'd shoot an approach into GVAC and then VFR'd over from there. You'd cancel and then VFR over. That is not a easy way to go because you're kind of at the end of the earth there. Next thing is Russia from Hooper Bay. So as we lobby, as we educate our congressional delegation, don't forget, the importance of the National Weather Service in your communications, because it's another piece of the pie beyond airports with the state, beyond the FAA's infrastructure. The user of that is the National Weather Service to give us the information we need to make solid decisions. So thank you for highlighting all those things. Next question is going to be kind of a broad question. So any of the three, you guys could answer this. And I'm going there because the FAA just talked about the FASE report, which is extremely important. The FASE is something that does get us to that aviate, navigate, communicate aspect. The strategy has been missing at the FAA until they really dug down, started working with carriers years ago, a big shift in kind of the late 90s, early 2000s. And then that relationship has continued to go for collaboration. Now the FASE is the first thing where carriers actually felt okay to be honest and share that, hey, we're a ship with no mast. So the wind blows and we're gonna ride it. But now you put the mast up, you put the sail down. It's a very important tool. But as we look at the FASE, it addresses AWOS installations and outages and VWAS viability. In your opinion, did we hit all the marks in FASE, or is there more to go, particularly with weather infrastructure as we move into the next iteration or the next opportunity to comment? Did the FASE hit it all?
There's more.
What is it?
No, I mean, that's a really broad question, and I don't want to treat it too lightly, but you know, as you think about how the aviation infrastructure of the United States was built and the eras that it was built in, it evolves, everything evolves, right? I think back to my first years as an air traffic controller, and I remember talking to the tech ops guys, and they lived at the radar sites. They always had someone who was living there. So those guys took care of those radar sites like they were their fire engine. You know, they were checking every connection and every piece and loving it to death, and they took fantastic care of those sites. Well, there isn't that kind of human resources out there in the system anymore. You can't do that. And so the number of people that are out there and how you support those systems has really changed the way that works. And so I think when we talk about something, I've certainly been vocal about, you know, trying to, how do we define the AWOS problem? How do we define, you know, that started from some conversations you and I had, Lee, but the, you know, how do we define that problem? And if you think about how you look at AWOS maintainability and services, I think we have to change the way our mindset is. It's not the old days of a deployment model where in the FAA's world, correctly so at the time, it was, okay, we need a piece of equipment. Do we have the money? Do we have the people to install it? Do we have the equipment on hand? Let's go do it. Okay, job done, it's installed. Now let's follow preventive maintenance. When it fails, that's a problem we'll figure out. Now it's one where you have to look at the services. You have to say what's available to the pilot at the time. We want to set the pilot up for success. We want all Alaskan pilots to die of old age. That's the only thing. And when you look at how that's handled, we did, Mike Jones, who's going to be doing some presentations later, and he tells a great story of the impacts of weather services. If you look at how you maintain AWOSs in the lower 48 versus Alaska, if you have a problem at an AWOS in Alaska, I'm not going to say I'm a tech ops guy, but they're going to have to figure out, okay, how can I get a person there? It's going to take a day to get them there. It's going to take a day to get them back. What other preventive maintenance things can I do when I'm there? How can I get my biggest bang for the buck for that trip? If you're in the lower 48, it might be, hey, check this AWOS in the morning and check that one in the afternoon and do this other thing and make sure you're home for dinner. And so your ability to touch sites is vastly different. So that's why we see an outage difference between the typical percentage of reported outages or deficiencies in the lower 48 versus Alaska. That's just the reality that we all face. So, but you have to define the problem the right way. And so I think it's about defining it in terms of services to the pilot, because if you lack services to the pilot, that's pressure on the pilot. pressure on the pilot is a safety impact.
Okay, I want to carry on with Greg because he really set the stage. I think from an infrastructure perspective, especially with regard to FASI and even the reauthorization bill potentially, I think that a performance metric should be developed and published by the FAA for service delivery point. Right now, there is no place there's no metric that you can look at and say, how long should an AWAS be up and operational? So that's a service. If a METAR is and it is critical to an IFR flight decision, why don't we have a dashboard that we can go to and say, how long has this AWAS been out of service? When is it going to be restored? What's the restoration window? And what is its current performance ratio? So is 90% okay? Is 91? Is 99? How about, let's say, 2 nines of availability? That's 99%. Leaves 1% out of service. If you think about an operational perspective at that service delivery point, is 30% of a METAR, is 30% of delivery, is that adequate? I think not. That's 30% of the time that an operator is scrambling, trying to find data to justify a flight decision for IFR. So what do we do then? Well, we start looking at, well, should we do a VFR flight? Should we fly out and take a look? That's what we're trying to stop. That's what ADS-B is all about. That's what weather cameras is all about. That's what the METAR is all about, is trying to give our operators, the operators, enough information to make a good IFR decision. IFR is the safest mode of flight. So, I am an implementer, so I have a tendency to look at a problem and then attack it. So if I sound a little strong, please bear with me. That's just my way. I see a problem, we attack it, we fix it, kind of a thing. So I say that in FASI and in the reauthorization bill, that we request that the FAA develop a performance metric and publish that on a public dashboard, just like the FAA has required the large operators to have a dashboard and publish their delayed route or their delayed flights and what their flight statuses are. I think it would be very helpful in 2 ways. It gives the public the opportunity to look and see what is going on at that airport. Why can't I get a METAR? And or what elements of this METAR are out. And I know how to build an algorithm. We did it with weather cameras to build an algorithm that says if one of the components is out, then that takes away from that 2 nines of availability. So let's consider that, as an aviation community. Let's try to push that kind of a thing. The 2 things, the operators have data. The other thing, it helps the FAA more focus politically and to address these infrastructure problems. Is it our problem as an aviation community that the METAR doesn't exist today because comms are bad? Well, it's really our problem that we don't have a METAR, and the FAA knows what the solutions are for those comms. And they need to address that. And I think that a dashboard would really kind of help everybody focus on, let's get to some solutions, not lean on, well, infrastructure is bad. Let's address the problem, okay. So that's one of the things in FASI that I definitely would recommend. Another thing in FASI that I think I would recommend is, why don't we have a backup to the AWAS? Things fail. Let's face it, telecoms is bad. It's out there, it's difficult. But there are solutions, but it's hard to get to those solutions with all the security concerns, the financing concerns, all that. Let's build a backup. Let's get an approved system that's not a full-blown AWAS, but it gives the critical elements necessary to make a flight decision, right? And let's put that in place. And when the AWAS is down, operators can swing to that piece of equipment. In fact, I know that Section 322 in the FAA reauthorization bill of 2018, that was the intent of that of that bill or of that language was, let's push this so that an operator can use an alternate source of weather data to make a flight decision if a METAR is not available. So let's see if we can work that kind of language into FASI and into the reauthorization bill. So I think I'll leave those 2 points there.
Yeah, just a few things to add, and I agree with everything Walter and Greg said on this. The thing I will say with FASI, it's certainly not perfect and complete, but I'm not really sure if that was the intent of putting it together. Where I think FASI has been really effective, and we certainly appreciate putting together these kind of strategic plans that are major lifts for an agency to do and to highlight these high priorities like they did. Some of the items that we see in the FASI are major initiatives that would be, have been discussed for my entire career. So just checking off a few of those boxes would be huge milestones from my perspective. We certainly would support and be excited for any kind of modernization in the communications infrastructure. I think most people in the FAA would agree on that one. And part of that modernization would be things like backup communications for when your primary goes out. Is something that I know is being discussed, and using other kind of best practice lesson learns that are out there. Because it's certainly, we are heavy users of the observations through Service A. We are able to call up over the phone and get some of the information, but we can't disseminate it, is one of the huge things that we can't do. So it's kind of stuck in a stovepipe when we do that, and that's similar to any dispatcher or pilot doing the same thing. A few of the things that we see in the FASI report that we would be really excited about would be there's discussion or review of the NOTAM policy when it comes to Service A. That's something we've discussed with the FAA for years and years now. That would be a huge improvement, and one that we have a little bit of a disagreement between the agencies as far as how high of a priority a Service A outage is. Where we are seeing it as like a higher priority, but because of this policy, that would be a huge difference if we could become more aligned there. And then really just any kind of expansion of the network and moving to this performance-based weather standard type framework. And the description I hear a lot that excites me with that is the silver standard of weather information, whether it be forecasts or observations, or the VWAS project that Walter started during his time at Webcams that's continued to move forward, and expanding to these areas that have no IFR infrastructure, and give them something that you can make a decision off of. It's really exciting to see a different standard. It's something that we tried to do with a system called MAWS years ago that kind of didn't really expand because we couldn't certify it, was really the major holdup with that project. So if we were able to move forward with that kind of standard, we can start to expand with these low cost, low power, easier to deploy type networks. That's all I have.
Those are great comments, especially on the modernization aspect. I just did a quick look on my phone to see how many, in our service volume, we're on schedules to 72 communities in Western Alaska. There's about 42 AWASs in our network, including the 139 airports who they're never out, they're good. But just looking today, there's probably 30% are down, which is a very good day. Normally we're at 60 to 70% of the AWAS is down. And that's not, I don't know if there's Service A, Service B, Service 12,000C, doesn't matter to an operator, right? Because if it's down, it's down. You can make some phone calls if the phones are gonna work, but that aspect is something that is really important, the modernization key. What are the backups? I mean, at AWAS, I don't know when they were designed. It had to be a long time ago. At 207 was designed and, built in the 80s. A Beaver was built way long before that. They're still awesome, usable airplanes, just like a landline. I think my parents still have one. And it works for them. I don't have a landline. My kid doesn't even know what a landline is. But now you could put on a pair of goggles and have a video call. You just pinch your Vision Pro and have a call, and you pop up, and the world is modernizing. AWASs are still usable, but is that the only source, right? And should you have to spend 7 to 10 years to figure out what modernization is? By then, we're going to be, 100%. This meeting is going to be, AI virtuals of us sitting in a room drinking coffee while we're out skiing pretty soon. And it's going to be cool because we'll be able to digitally download what happened that day, and it'll be great. But that modernization aspect, I think, is key to what you guys are talking about. And what are the alternatives? What can we propose to be usable for us to make aviation safer? It's not just going to make aviation safer, it's going to make Alaska weather safer for the general public. So thank you guys for those comments. And then just to plug for the FASI, thank you guys for your work on that. It is really good. And how do you know if you're sitting next to a pilot in here? He'll tell you. You just look at his big watch, he'll tell you, you'll know pretty soon. Normally, pilots don't tell the FAA they're a pilot. Right? Worst case scenario, I'm a dentist. And best case scenario, I might say that I'm a ramper, let them know I kind of work at the airport because they might have saw me. What FASI's done is made pilots be more comfortable telling them, you guys, that you're a pilot. And that's a huge deal. So thank you for that. Next question. I'm going to skip the question kind of about what are the impacts of not having this, because they know the impacts. They live it every day, right? But Greg, I think you might take the lead on this one. What are the roadblocks to maintaining that weather infrastructure? You talked about it a little bit earlier in terms of the human capital, but what other roadblocks are you seeing that can reduce the frequency of those outages? Or can you expand on what you talked about earlier?
Oh, thanks. It's a great starting question. We did mention it earlier in terms of staffing, in terms of money. But I like to talk concept first. And one thing that I will say is that, Mike has talked about a unified approach. And to his credit, he believes in that. And sometimes that is awkward to get that started because people are going to ask you questions and maybe that's not the way we've always answered them. And so it takes a change process to be able to redefine the problem in a way that we can deal with it. Now, I think, so when I think about roadblocks, I think about it's how we think about it. If we had a unanimous opinion in this room that we were going to make sure we had backup ways of delivering METAR information, and that was the most important thing, we'd probably go out and, I don't know, we'd talk to Iridium, we'd talk to satellite, we'd do Starlink, we'd get the FAA to help us figure out how we can attach a gadget to a AWAS so that it can go out on Starlink instead of them telling, no, that's not how we build them. It's that change process. It's thinking about it in terms of the technology is different now than when these solutions were initially created. So our opportunities are different. So we have to define the problem so that we can identify a solution and get around it as a group, and then be a Congress to recommend that to the FAA. But mostly it's if you think of the human resources and the example I was giving about going to a remote site, you have to plan the travel out, you have to plan the work, you have to plan the logistics of the parts, you have to plan the travel back. What else can you get done while you're there? We all want it to be the bat signal where the signal goes up and the AWAS is out and a tech ops guy parachutes in and fixes it. But really a tech ops manager somewhere is going, how can I make this trip pay off? I got 17 things I got to get done. How many other things can I get done? Because that's what they're so good at, is that they're good at stretching that equipment and stretching those budgets. So I'm going back to the redefinition of the problem, which is the services model. Does the pilot have access either online to the METAR? Do they have the ceiling, the altimeter, and the visibility so that they can dispatch the flight on the broadcast and online or not. I mean, that you have, if we don't identify the problem the right way, it's hard to come up with the right solution. So it's easy to say funding, but even if you gave Alaska Tech Ops unlimited amount of money, they're not going to go out and find 40 new AWAS technicians to hire tomorrow and move them around the state. So I'll just leave it there, I guess, that funding and human resources are the biggest one.
That's really interesting. As you were talking through that, I was thinking, okay, how would we look at this as a business? And when we look at it as a business, we immediately go to the 4 components and the 12 elements of a safety management system program, right? How are we identifying our risk? How are we mitigating and managing our risk? You know, where does something elevate for a management approval in a flight risk assessment or a ramp risk analysis? And really, that's ultimately the one gap I see in FASI on this individual item, infrastructure. We're not managing it from a safety management system risk point of view. We're managing it from a what's possible. You know, what loop rounds can we get by to make it happen? So the SMS aspect of just that one point, I don't remember what it, 1.2.6 or something, I don't remember which one it is in FASI, but running that through an SMS and showing the lack of infrastructure could publicly show the flying public, because you said something, you said our airlines, and then you said the airlines. It's our airlines, because we're having to work together to fly people. Grant flies a ton of people out to Hooper Bay. We don't fly much. But us as an aviation community are helping Hooper Bay, whose AWAS is down again, by the way. And it's like a town of 1,400 people. You know, it's a big town in Western Alaska. So that SMS safety management system of that component might get us to where we need to be if they showed publicly how risky that flight is going to be because we don't provide the infrastructure.
I think that's a super important point, and I'm glad you said it that way, because it's the way I think of this. I mean, when I started in the FAA, it was a blame-based culture. It was a fault-based culture, and I loved it. It worked really, really good. But we had to change, and we changed for something better, and the change was really hard. But that's what this is. This is a change to an SMS, non-punitive safety reporting culture. That's what we're talking about. The weather infrastructure gaps, how we report them, how we repair them. That's about moving us towards a safety managed system.
If you don't mind. Yeah, so Lee hit on something, and I want to carry on with what Greg has stated. But a question that always keeps occurring to me is, do you as an operator, do you know what the cost to your airline is when an AWAS is down? When you have to, do you know in say annually, Hooper Bay has been out, what are the financial costs associated with that system being out, right? If you are required by law to use that METAR to make your flight decision, and you still have the ability to make a VFR flight decision, you fly out, turn around, come back. What was that cost today? I talked to one guy who, and I won't tell you who it is, but something he's told me years ago, many years ago. I helped him with a design on a camera system that he installed for himself and for his operation. And he said 2 turnarounds and the system paid for itself. So he knew how much it cost him to fly out, turn around, come back, right? 2 turnarounds paid for that system. Do you guys know how many turnarounds you have a year? Do you know what those costs are? I would encourage you, if you don't, start crunching that data, because when you can say what the cost to your operation, to Grant trying to get to Hooper Bay, what the cost impacts are of that AWAS being down, that's extremely powerful leverage that can be used, because the FAA doesn't know. I mean, they're all trying to do their job and everybody's busy, and they don't look at it that way at all. I know, I lived in it 27 years. And we were working our butts off to try to do to work through the system, and we didn't have a focus on that. But that's in your court. The monopolistic nature of the FAA's system, where it has to be certified or you can't use it, is extremely damaging. It's why I used to say it chokes to death the weather industry that lives out there that's trying to provide data. It's choking you to death. We need a metric, a performance metric in the commercial world, so that commercial operators can provide, or commercial companies can provide weather. What is that going to do? It's going to drive the cost of weather systems down. It'll drive down the cost of operations. And it'll drive down the cost to you as an operator to try to fly out when an AWOS doesn't work. Now, I often say, back in the day when Ma Bell owned telephone, a remote telephone was a phone booth out on the corner, and you plug a quarter in it. As soon as Ma Bell was deregulated, the industry built one of these. Now everybody's got one in their pocket, and it's the most powerful thing you probably have in your life, right? That's what weather systems, weather stations, weather systems, weather services can do with the deregulation of this certified METAR system, right? Let's build a performance specification that says, this is what a weather station, how it has to operate. And if you meet these performance specs, you too can provide a METAR. And what we'll end up with is in 5 or less than 10 years, you'll end up with METAR stations galore, right? And they'll reduce in size, they'll reduce in cost, and they will increase in availability. So that's my little speech to you all as operators, to us as a flying community, is, that's one of the things that we should start working into FASI. We should work that into our congressional bills. We need to deregulate the METAR system. All of our technology allows us to build self-checking systems so that our weather station checks itself to make sure it's providing accurate weather, and the procedures that we use can then provide that tertiary check of the data before it gets delivered to people. So that's my big speech on, let's rally to try to eliminate the monopolistic nature of a METAR. So.
Yeah.
Let me jump on that one more time. I think the AWOS example is a good one because the FAA sets the rules. The FAA says if the weather's a certain way, you have to get a METAR observation before you can dispatch. And you have an AWOS that we installed but doesn't work, so you can't get it, so you can't fly. That's the answer. That's not really a good answer. That's not a safety system. And so we have to redefine that problem. If there was, the roadblock was kind of the starting question that we jumped off of and went off into crazy land. But the roadblock is, and Mike, I'll talk to Kevin about if there's a way we can word this for a FOSI adjustment. The roadblock is, a lot of times the FAA's response is, that's not how we do it. And that's the end of the conversation. And there's a lot of problem solvers in this room. There's a lot of new technologies. The biggest roadblock we could remove would be an advocate to help us define and establish what are acceptable alternatives.
Thank you guys for that. I know we're running short on time. I can go questions for days here, but I want to open the floor up to all of you because we have some serious pros in the room here. Any questions? I'm going to bring this over. Oh, go ahead. Oh, you do? Online questions. Sweet. Any plans to use Starlink to communicate weather? From Ed. In terms of I'm assuming, I'm going to throw out an assumption here for AWOS, since we're talking straight infrastructure. Do you guys know of any plans to utilize that service? Hey.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so a great question. Are there plans to use Starlink SATCOM for AWAS? The answer is yeah. As a matter of fact, Kevin Hubbard is working with our PMO folks, which are the program management folks that kind of put stuff together and think up some integrations about adding additional, a redundant comms link. So you got local telco that gets you up to the internet, and then a satellite board, comms board. So yeah, we're looking at it. And to all your points, I read you loud and clear, and I'm with you. And Walter, I love your thoughts, and I'm a fixer. We're fixers now. So we're bringing those questions to these folks that, hey, this is how we do it in the FAA. Yeah, it doesn't cut it. We've got technology here and available to us now, satellite communications. We've seen that great results of Starlink after the quintillion break, right? These are great opportunities for us to tag on some additional communications and capabilities and stop the, with all respects, because I love the FAA, is the stiff arm, right? Because that's not the way we do things, or because security. Come on. We do encryption all the time, every time. So to answer the question, yes, thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Jackie, thanks. Good for being here as well. You guys brought the A-team. I see that the post office brought the A-team. We got Jaffet and Victoria, so great seeing the A-team here. We got another question from here.
More of a comment and reinforcement of what Walter has put out there in the performance standard that needs to be put out there to bring us up to utilizing the latest technology. It's so important. We owe it to the public, the flying public, that either whether it's people we're moving or goods we're moving out to the bush, we can't do that without having reliable infrastructure and information to make those decisions. And like you said, two returns could pay for a station, right? So it's costly to operate. So having 30% of the stations down and is not acceptable. We need to look at ways to incorporate that with the performance standard, SMS accountability, to bring it and embrace technology and bring it to where we can have that available to all of the operators for the flying public, because it's good for everybody. So safe operations, good decision making, moving people and stuff like we're designed to do. So thank you.
I see another A-team member, Joanne Ford, is here, making RNAV approaches possible. Jackie, question or comment?
Thanks, Lee. I don't want to be a broken record. I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record. Walter, that's brilliant. We need you to come forward in FASE and to share your ideas. We get so much traction from FASE, all of the good ideas. When you guys come to us and tell us in those listening sessions and in those forum, that is the best way for us to get this information out. Keep thinking of good ideas. Good ideas come from everywhere, from anyone. And so bring them forward. You're gonna all be getting emails from us on FASE. And Greg, thanks for a great idea. Redefine the problem so that we can work on the solutions. So thank you all.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
More of a comment, and Walter, I appreciate all the work you did before you left, and hopefully you'll continue with that. And you mentioned, thank you, Section 322, when you were talking earlier, 2018, and we're still doing the same thing. It's a law that we haven't even been able to do. One of the things we talk about with FASE, and it's a great team, everything is going on, is a lot of strategic planning. Like we talked about, Aviate, okay, I need the now. Section 322 is for the now. So while we're doing all this infrastructure, coming up with all these weather systems, we can still get in safely to these places. Again, we've got, Joanne's building some great stuff for us up here. She's providing that safe approach into these airfields that we go into, yet my guy is still flying 500, 800 feet above the water in marginal conditions to get into these fields as opposed to flying that approach, because the procedures have not been approved. All of us came up with the procedures, and none of them got approved. There might be one in the states that's approved. We created an advisory circular to define what non-certified weather is. And that advisory circular is law. And they hold their feet to the fire, and it's like, oh, well, we got to launch weather balloons, we got to do this, we got to go in and test these guys and make sure they can give us certified or non-certified weather as they defined it. Which we all know that flying to the villages, we can barely get people to come out to pick up the mail, let alone have somebody to give us a weather report out there. We have a lot of the tools, the weather camera systems, the VWAS systems that are all non-certified, and that's the whole point of non-certified, but yet, we still are not doing what we should be doing. Everything we're doing is great. I want to keep pushing this fast. He's doing an amazing job, but we need stuff that we can do tomorrow. And that's one of the things I think we really need to follow up on is that Section 322.
Thanks for that. That was something that I wanted to mention earlier, and I kind of cut myself short on it, thinking we would probably get there. But that definitely should be, there should be, I think, some verbiage that's laid into the FASI that starts forcing the issue of approval for that Section 322. It was inserted in that bill specifically to start moving certified or approved aviation weather into the industry. The VWAS, I was the one that built it. I worked with Flight Standards to build it, and the whole purpose behind it was to build a performance standard that could be handed off to the industry so that the industry could start developing their own METARs. So this whole thing of deregulating the METAR really began with the development of the VWAS and that Section 322 to support that, to move forward. So that's the history behind when you hear VWAS, that was the purpose of it. It wasn't intended to be another FAA system that they hold in, and I'm not trying to be critical. I loved everybody I worked with over there. They're fantastic people at FAA. But there is that, again, that monopoly, that monopolistic frame of thought. We've got to get out of that if we're going to start supporting UAS and UAM, AAM operations. And that's where the industry needs to go. And the one thing that's dragging us into the dirt and keeps us in that dirt is this monopoly on aviation weather. We have to figure out how to deploy a density of these systems that we trust. And I think that that's where we should be pushing. The new technologies shouldn't be just an aircraft that flies by itself, docks up, loads and unloads cargo. There has to be the support structure underneath it, and these weather stations have to be there. So we need to push weather station or the weather systems concept into the future with low cost, high density systems. And the only way to do that is to deregulate it, go from the once in every 8 blocks phone booth to everybody's got one in their pocket. That's the whole purpose behind that. And that was, the team that I worked with, my Flight Standards team, that was our intention when we started that. I think it was in 2015, I think, when we started it. But anyway,
Thanks,
sorry
Walter.
to go on and
No,
on.
you're good.
But I just wanted to make
I'm just
that
looking at
point.
the watch, that's all.
Yeah.
No, you're good,
Please,
Walter.
like,
I know we're out of time, but we're gonna do the one question on Zoom because we want participation as much as we can from our friends that couldn't be here in person. Okay, question from Justin, and it's a Troy question probably. Is there discussion with US DOT to utilize their SHREB buildings potentially for housing ASOS, AWAS, VWAS, weather cams, any of those things? If you guys haven't seen an AWAS, they're a little like igloo dome, And out west, they keep a little bit of extra room to fit a cot in there so they could sleep in there, the tough people that are working on them. So it's its own unit. It sits off, usually you trudge through about that much snow or water or slush or tundra. You get to it, and then the folks out there oftentimes spend the night when they're working on it. They put a little heater in there, stay, a nice 20 below, and sleep and generally wake up. So Troy, any questions or any comments on that?
Yeah, to quote Mike, yes. We're constantly looking for ways to partner with both the FAA and communities. We do have some emergency shelters in certain areas. The SHREB is a very important building for the airport. And there's a lot of people that want to put a lot of things in a SHREB, and the SHREB's only so big. So what we need to do is we have these partnerships and these conversations is we need to continue to say, okay, what kind of infrastructure do we really need? What makes sense? And then does it need to be in the SHREB or does it need to stand alone? We have plenty of airport property to put infrastructure on. And so we're trying to figure out the right way to do that.
Thank you, Troy. And I think in that we'll wrap up. I really appreciate that question, Justin. The collaboration between the landowner, the land users, the air carriers, the community, whoever is there. There's not a lot of space in rural Alaska, right? And if we could put everything where the one power source already is, that gets us over the hump. So continue the collaboration. Appreciate that. Greg, David, Walter, you guys make a huge difference in aviation in Alaska. It'd be super easy for you to go get some oceanfront property in Arizona and sail off into the sunset and call it a day, right? But you're not doing that. You're here using your expertise, what you've gained in your career, and also as you as individuals, you're putting that value back in to improve the lives of the people we're all trying to serve. And can't say thank you guys enough. So thank you for that.
Okay, big thank you to the Weather Infrastructure Panel and to Lee Ryan for moderating. So another round of applause, please. Okay, while these folks are making their way back, I'm just going to talk here for a second about a couple of things. So first off, at this time, we're starting an SMS implementation breakout session. It's going to be in the Turnigan room. So if you're interested in that topic, it is, I think, something worth attending. So that's out that way. Again, past the exhibitors you see towards the restroom, you'll see the Turnigan room. Before we get started here, I just want to talk a little bit about my experience. So my background that's pertinent to this topic. I'm a commercial pilot. I came up through Anchorage, through Merrill Field, and I met a lot of folks on similar tracks during that journey. And one of the common themes that I saw through that experience was a frustration with